business women that are active and people that care about our economy, because we have a price to pay for our victory. And good morning, everyone, to you personally, because I'm yours today. And in order to have a round of introduction, I'm Volodymyr Lavrenchuk. I represent NEQSOL Holding. I'm a general manager, and I was assigned as a moderator. That's a great responsibility and possibility to have a closer look. And I talked to some of you during the break, and I figured out the mood you're in. I've watched lots of ratings from MGM and EBA, international ratings, and we've discussed investment climate for years. The challenges, of course, mostly challenges. The rating was led by factors that interfere with the process of investment. It was about the rule of law, corruption, and you name it, regulations. And we got used to it. So if we take a look at the investment schedule, well, mostly FDI mean level was around 5 to 6 billions. And starting with Lugano 2022, we are getting used to the value of 350 billions to 750 billions of dollars. That's the need for investments for the restoration of Ukraine. The war goes on, and the amount is rising. And there is an interest among those that's been on the market for a while, and they know the situation, they know the ratings, analytics, sympathies, and the question is how realistic it is. Are they going to wait? And this is a question I would like to highlight. During the panel discussion, we have lots of honored people, lots of experienced people in this field, and I would like you to introduce yourself and just provide a short commentary. Just wanted to check your mics. And if I take a look at the latest EBA rating, we have the same factors in the top list. Also, the Prime Minister talked about 6 million of migrants, and lots of them they don't want to get back, and they talked about decreasing GDP and we are looking for partners. I think partners was the word to attract investments, and everybody's so optimistic. There's a colleague from Deloitte, and they said they're out hunting for partners to participate in the restoration of Ukraine. So where did they get this optimism? Because they're pragmatic people. And if I ask you personally, what word comes to your mind? The word to describe the driver behind these investments. I think we have a disproportion. In a gender-wise, we couldn't get more female voices. I will give the floor to Yulia first. What is the word that comes to your mind about investments? and just give us a sentence to describe yourself. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. One word, reforms. I can repeat it as long as you want, because without any reforms, any investments are impossible. It's going to be slow, but it's not going to be rapid. For the list that you've provided, I think there's a security. I would add security, to be short. Yes, we have Volodymyr Kuzio, Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine. The floor is yours. What's your commentary? Hello, thanks for inviting me. I represent government in the panel. That's a great responsibility to communicate with the market, with potential investors, understand their pains, challenges, and on my side to look for solutions for investors. And one word is possibilities and potential or capacity. Because $400 billion of losses, according to World Bank, these are the losses for the last year. I mean, from the start of the war, it's colossal. And the potential to restore the country is colossal as well. So together with reforms, we can do that. There are possibilities and there's potential in many industries and sectors. And we're going to talk about that as well. Thank you for recalling foreign investors. We have Vasile Tofan representing one of the powerful companies in Ukraine, Horizon. What's your comment on that?
In English. So for me, I think the key word that has not been named is European Union. I know it's maybe not top of mind now because we have more pressing issues, but I think the European Union trajectory is going to be the game changer over the next 10, 15 years. And it doesn't matter when Ukraine will make it into the EU. It's the path that matters, because if you look at the other Central Eastern European countries, actually their rate of growth prior to the accession has been double the rate after the accession. I think this is a huge driver of potential growth that will attract investors, will create lots of opportunities. So for me, this is a key word to mention too.
Дуже дякую. Serhiy Chernenko.
Thanks, Serhiy Chernenko, the first Ukrainian international bank. One word, one sentence, but EU was the word they used to describe a threat for entrepreneurship because of bureaucracy and everything. So what's your perspective on that? I think, well, we have a long way to go to face the threat of, EU challenges. What I feel from my conversation with clients is safety. The words are safety and predictability. This is what they need to be able to invest and work and develop. Thanks. Thanks, Serhiy. We have Serhiy Komarov, who promised us to join us online, but he's here in person. We have a pleasure to have him here. So what's your comment on that? Good morning. Just a short comment. Contradictions. Right? See, I've seen it for years. So we make 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And we won't make it if we continue the pace. So you mentioned reforms and predictability. That's the right combination with reforms, and this is why we need to make 5 steps forward, 1 step back. They've known you as a Kyivstar CEO.
I was impressed on your top argument, and as a banker, former banker, I would ask you to announce what do you focus on when we speak about the driver to attract investors?
I think at the highest level for both investors and insurers, and I work globally with them, it's about confidence. There is a lack of confidence at the moment, and the whole game is about building confidence. Everything everyone else has said, all contributes to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for introduction. Дякую за цей вступ.
You've heard the voice, you've heard the names of the speakers, and I have a great pleasure and risk to try to do it efficient, and I will try to give you more floor, try not to talk too much. So my suggestions, we have three different areas that you mentioned. The first one, we can focus on international FDIs, international investors, their moods, their expectations. I think the new head of the World Bank said, Ajay Banga said in the interview yesterday, 1/3 of the money for the restoration of Ukraine will come from the private sector. That's a huge amount, 450 billion, like 1/3 of 450 billion, so 1/3 of 750 $billion, but they need trust. And this is how you use tools to ensure trust. We have a presentation. I'm not sure if it works. Crispin prepared a presentation. And can we share it, please? Later. Okay, we'll give him the floor later.
Окей, я запрошую вас до слова. Будь ласка.
Okay, the floor is yours. Please, what's your perspective?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and my apologies that I don't speak Ukrainian, but so you'll have to manage with my English. I was going to focus on war risk insurance, which is where I have been working pretty much full-time all this year, working here in Ukraine, and particularly with the US and UK governments and the industry. The challenge is the insurance industry has had massive losses over the last few years. There's very little insurance capital available for Ukraine. War risk has traditionally been the problem of government, not the insurance industry, and a lack of useful risk information. Everyone thinks that the whole of Ukraine is like Bakhmut. The pictures in the media all show the damage, and people don't realize that 75% of the communities in Ukraine have not had a single attack since February last year. I'll come on to that a bit more in a moment. I think to get the insurance industry moving, we're looking for public-private partnerships. And these can come, without that, they're quite clear. They won't come in without some form of public sector backing at any scale. There are various models that we are trying. The first is donor-funded models run by the international financial institutions, EBRD, World Bank, DFC. Small amounts of cover available now, but the model isn't really scalable to the level that we've been talking about because it requires donor funding. Second model is the government backstop. A lot of Western governments have used this for terrorist risk, where the insurance companies insure up to a certain limit, and thereafter the governments pick up the tab. Everyone agrees this is the model for war risk, but no government has yet opened up its balance sheet and exposed it in this way. So people agree it's the way ahead, but we're by no means anywhere near there yet. And the third, which I'll talk a little bit more about, is a first loss fund, where the government puts a first loss fund in place. And on grain insurance, I think this is a good example. I've been working very hard with colleagues like Volodymyr and across the Ukraine government to help put together affordable insurance for grain shipments in the Black Sea. Insurance was about 1% under the Black Sea grain agreement. When Putin withdrew, it rocketed up to about 5% per shipment. That means if you do 10 ships a year, you're paying half the value of the hull in premiums. It's clearly, it's not sustainable. So we've been working with the government of Ukraine to put together a public-private partnership. They will provide a first loss fund, and the insurance industry will crowd in on the back of that. We got full commitment from the insurance industry, about 120% coverage. The details we're working on at the moment, and I would hope that this will go live within the next 10 days and allow affordable insurance for the 2 50,000-ton ships a day, every day for a year, that is needed to shift your grain. It's an enormous load to do systematically, and I think we're almost there. My next point is war risk data. If we could have a slide, if it works. One of the big challenges the insurance and investors say is they don't know what's going on in Ukraine. They rely on the media, everything is black, everything is Bakhmut. Yeah? And you get a completely distorted impression. The National Security Council in Ukraine has detailed data of every attack. A beautiful, clean data set, the like of which we don't have anywhere in the UK about anything. It's a wonderful data set. And we've been working with them to create a platform where actual war risk incidents are recorded and available to investors, insurers, and governments. And today I'm pleased to be able to announce that that platform's going live. And we've got a couple of slides here to show it. You have a heat map, which we've just had. You can then drill right down. You can ask, within 10 kilometers, how many incidents have there been? You can do it by sector, how many energy installations have been hit, how many transport infrastructures have been hit. You can drill right down to community level. And when you look at this data set, I think there's a really interesting fact, and which Secretary Danilov has quoted, which I think sums it all up. That this year, 75% of the communities in Ukraine have not had a single war risk related incident. Ukraine is open for business now, but the world doesn't get that. And I hope this platform will allow insurers, investors, governments, partner governments, to be able to make their own risk assessment decisions based on hard fact. So, what's the way ahead? It's about building confidence, as I've already said. It's about encouraging investors and insurers to move into the market. Give them more information, the data risk platform. Start using public sector money and different forms of public-private partnership. That will give confidence. Get the high-risk investors moving on low-risk projects first. Who are the high-risk investors? They're people who often aren't after a guaranteed profit. So benefactors, family offices, people who have an altruistic reason for investment. Get them in now, get them on the lower risk projects. As the Prime Minister said, tech, it's low risk, it's difficult to blow tech up. Green energy, actually pretty resilient. Get them in to do that. The high risk insurers then, the specialist war risk insurers, now they're getting the information, they start to come in, and we build confidence so that as or when violence diminishes, there is a confidence in the market which will allow the large-scale investors and the global insurers to come in. Thank you.
Crispin, thank you. I was on the edge of time, and at the same time, I didn't want to stop you because it sounds very, very challengeable. And if I may comment, I promised not to speak much, but if I may comment, in the audience of number of conferences that I spent personally in Ukraine last months, still quite often there is a sound of some skepticism about efficiency of state in this or that model of management, big companies, smaller one, and the state-private partnership in different forms, as you mentioned. It's a very great topic to speak about today. And I look forward just for comments around. Will you present later the data, your model?
We share them.
Now?
We share them. They're done.
Done. Okay. Yeah. Vasile.
Okay, Vasile.
Because in this block, clearly your experience of attracting international funding, international investors is a championship one. And secondly, you personally may share your communications with number of. You speak with hundreds and you have tens, right? You speak with thousands and you have 100 of possible deals. So based on number of talks you have, negotiations and deals closed, what are investors look for to hunt projects in Ukraine?
Thank you, Volodymyr. So I'll start by saying that for us, it's not a theoretical construct. We're deploying money as we speak. So just to share, I'll be an optimist on this panel. I think we know the pessimist's case very well, but I would like to communicate the optimist case too. We started raising a new fund for Ukraine. So our business model is that we go to global investors from US, from Western Europe, and we convince them to invest in our fund so that we can invest in Ukraine. We set ourselves a target of $250 million, and people said we are crazy. You're never going to raise it. Who will give money to a country like Ukraine at war? Now, some of you may know that it's not only that we raised the 250, we actually have an intermediate close at nearly 300 million. So we had to ask our investors to raise the cap, and we haven't stopped yet. So likely the fund is going to go even beyond that. So clearly, there are investors looking for exposure to Ukraine. And yes, we have a significant share of what you would call impact investors or development financial institutions. But in the third close of our fund, 65% are private investors. And they only primarily care about returns. So clearly, there are investors looking for exposure in Ukraine at the moment. I think I agree here with Crispin. I was in London for 24 hours, yesterday, so on a short trip, and it's true many of the investors still have this view of Ukraine as if the entire country is Bakhmut. So I fully empathize with that comment. And when we tell them that, look, guys, you may think that financial system has collapsed, but you'd be surprised. Banks work nearly business as usual. You may think that the national currency has completely devalued, but it's nothing compared to, say, the Argentinian peso or the Turkish lira during the same period. And in fact, the foreign exchange reserves were at 29 billion before the full-scale invasion. They are at 40 billion now. So clearly, again, I don't want to downplay the dramatism of the situation, but clearly there is room for communicating this message that there is also a bright side of things. And looking at our portfolio, I'll share now a stat that will surprise many of you. Last year, in 2022, the average, actually the median, which is a more accurate number in this case, the median revenue growth rate in US dollar terms for our portfolio in Ukraine has been 30% in dollar terms. This is extraordinary numbers. This is much better numbers than many companies in US or Western Europe. And of course, we have a bias towards exporting companies, technology companies who were not directly affected by the war. But even looking at some of the domestic champions, we have companies like Rosetka, I'm sure many of you know, or Prom, or Aurora. These companies are actually doing well. And Rosetka will return to the pre-war revenues by the end of this year. Aurora, another company, I'm not sure how many of you know Aurora. It's a national retailer by now, kind of the Dollar General of Ukraine, is opening one new store every 14 hours. So 10 stores per week. Just think about this. So the message I'm trying to send is that clearly there are opportunities, and I think we're doing our best to communicate those opportunities to the world. Now, in terms of financing at the same time, I have to be honest, I don't think there's a long line at the same time. Yes, there are risk-taking investors, but the line is not very long, right? And looking at that, I don't think we we have to overestimate the number of investors that will come. Typically looking at other crises and other wars, and I encourage you, speaking of data sets, there's actually a very interesting study now on 200 years of wars. So an analysis on about 700 wars and how they were financed and how the reconstruction has happened after these wars. And actually, only in 20% of cases, the countries affected by war have say, grown at a larger pace than their trend before the war. So clearly, the investors are right to be skeptical at looking at Ukraine. They are right to be skeptical, in terms of the challenges there. But at the same time, there's enough success stories, like Italy has grown much faster after the war than before the war. Japan, that was hated by all their neighbors and was completely destroyed as a country, has grown much faster after the war than before the Second World War, and so on. So I think it's up to us to communicate that message, to find the pockets of growth, and hopefully all of us staying optimistic about the future of this country.
Thank you, Vasile. I have one more question that you probably provoked in my mind, that not a long line of investors are obvious now. Right? At the same time, I would quote Mustafa Nayem, who is the head of agency for Rebuild Ukraine. He mentioned yesterday in media that only 20% of building companies, construction companies, are available to participate in reconstruction projects now in Ukraine, or do participate in tenders, for other words. So there are there are some comments from the market and some criticism that there's a limited number of projects or limited number of teams that can manage this big number of projects. What do you observe?
Look, I think in our sector where we focus, technology companies, exporting companies, it's still, I think the number of good projects is larger than the amount of financing available. So personally, we are seeing, I'll tell you now a number, it's not public, but this year, we as Horizon Capital are looking to deploy about $80 to $90 million, right? We've announced already one transaction. We have another 4 in the making. So by the end of this year, we'll deploy about $90 million. These are large amounts, right? At the same time, I'll be interested actually to hear the comments of my respectful banking colleague. When I'm looking at some of the statistics, we have in the country a total loan book of the banking assets of $30 billion, 30, and a deposits balance of $65 billion. So I ask myself, with such a low loan to deposit ratio, where's the $35 billion in excess going to? I understand it's going to bonds and other things, but clearly, in terms of savings of the population, we have a lot of money that is not maybe put to the work of the private sector at the moment. Actually, I'm very curious what Oleg will comment on this.
Serhiy, одну секундочку,
Just a second. I need to pass the floor to you because, there was a hand raised by Oleksandr, Komarov, Alexander, and all the participants. If you feel a sympathy to the topic, raise your hand. Just a very short question to a colleague. Investment to pre-ply. Is this considered as an investment oriented on Ukraine or not?
First investment we did is into a company called Preply, which has their entire R&D in Ukraine. Yes, they sell to the world, but all the research and development is in Ukraine. About 50% of their workforce is in Ukraine. So in that sense, I think indeed to me it's an Ukrainian investment. Yes, they don't have a factory in Ukraine, but R&D is a sort of a factory.
Може ще запитання?
Another question to you, to Yulia. Yulia, you have a comment, okay. Tech retail, some elements of real estate, low ROI, high revenue, that's clear. But what's with the industry, okay? And this is like a different focus of investors. This is something that will talk, like the money is not engaged there. Thank you. We keep that comment, on the paper. The government mentioned it, and I now want Volodymyr, Kuzio, and you, Serhiy, because you had questions as well. We spoke of reforms. We heard of the trust. The trust to the reforming models. The Prime Minister's speech in Crispin said about different models of the PPP. So many issues. What's with Ukrainian tools? We spoke of these privileged loans and supporting specific sectors. We heard Yulia that industry, not all the industry is in the priority, and what other sectors should do. Big demand for your comments. Thank you. I think I'll continue. And all the previous speakers, I guess, pretty logical you were, and very good speeches, very good ideas. 1/3 of the losses within 2023 is from the private sector, from the lost revenues and high expenses. That's where the skepticism comes from. We are at war. We are competing with other emerging markets, frontier markets, and also with the tools. Treasury bills, for example, and so on. We are in very difficult conditions to fight for capital, but we as a government, what we can do in those conditions, for us to make this, to deblock private investment. And the answer may be the following. A couple of tools: de-risking, incentives, and development equity. To have the unlocking finally, and to give some comfort for investors. So it's a challenging task, it's a hard thing to do. So we don't see what can be like the only approach, the single approach. We just need to tailor the tools and have individual approach to everyone. In de-risking, we have to understand that sometimes we mix de-risking with something else. So de-risking happens in a couple of directions. First, de-risking of IFIs from the side of donors for their balance, to lower the risk for their balance, to establish programs, to maintain programs, to support Ukrainian private sector. $2.5 billion for today. The programs and commitments and implementations from EBRD, IFC, EIB, and other multilaterals. Then de-risking of the credit portfolios of banks, which actually are part of IFI programs. First, risk coverage. De-risking that actually allows banks to provide these loans, the guarantees from international organizations. De-risking of investments. Today in the ecosystem and in the tools available for Ukrainian international investors provided by American Development Finance Corporation, it's clear that this is a case-by-case approach and that they have a very detailed due diligence for each project. But at the same time, what mentioned by the organizations that there is a deficit of projects in the pipeline, no champions. As an example, we can show it to international community. From the donors, Trust Fund, MIGA, we received funding. We are so grateful to Great Britain, to Norway, for actually giving the funding and providing it. But several projects already were signed. Projects for banking and real sector. So, then, international expert credit agencies, we already have commitments from Japanese, Nexia, French BPI, France, German Hermes, and other expert agencies that they are ready to ensure the risks cooperating in Ukraine. And this is a limit. So, yesterday we had a very good meeting at the summit with the leading European expert credit agencies. We raised an issue, to expand the mandate and to allow ensuring Ukrainian investors, if we have joint ventures together with investors from insuring countries, those who ensure investment trade with Ukraine, and raise the coverage up to 100%. We also spoke to ACD to make an upgrade for Ukraine from 7th to 6th group, which will allow to actually lower the premium for risk. So we also expect the adoption of the law on ensuring the war risks, non-property risks by Ukrainian export credit agencies, which will allow to have the de-risking for involving the investment, to invest in the equipment in Ukraine. So this ecosystem, today we actually have it, it exists. It's not enough, of course, to have it, make it scalable. It covers various types of risks, investment, property, and trade. We expect that EBRD will launch by the end of the year a big fund on insurance for trade and property risks, and the previous commitments from donors, very eloquent, I'd say. We also work in the government to lower the insuring for product shipping. We speak now of the Black Sea Basin, the products shipped via the Black Sea. So we do hope, and we will continue this hard work to create the pool of reinsuring, the trust pool, which will allow us to launch the global of reinsurance market, reinsuring the risks in Ukraine. So we have this multi-dimensional work, and we have to encourage as well investors and ask investors to be more interested in programs, and please apply for insurance programs in multilaterals. If I have a couple of minutes, of course. So this is the part that goes to de-risking.
Incentives, we have around 40 billion hryvnias for incentives for Ukrainian business. And the focus here, the shift that we are having from raw material economy to processing economy. We're launching, let's say this, we're expanding our 579 program for processing. It gives bank clients to apply for funding of a launching of the industry, and also grants for processing will be available. These tools will make up about 20 billion hryvnias of support. Also, we have great investments that we planned for the next year. In the ministry, we're working on that will make this form of support happen. It will focus on machine building, on processing. And that's the second element. These are the incentives that the Ukrainian government can provide for the businesses. And the third one is development equity. We are working with BlackRock Financial and Market Advisory in order to create an environment with the support of our colleagues and the government. It will help the institutions to help them invest in the Ukrainian market, to attract funding of equity there for non-bankable projects. Thank you very much for that. Well, I can't help but say very shortly, what you say it resonates with me. Well, sometimes you have to roast the government sometimes, during the panels. And I have questions sometimes. There was a conference with Deloitte a couple of days ago where they talked about what can unite Ukraine. I think this is a phenomenal thing. It's not just about one program. It's good that we have this variety, that we have something to choose from. And you can communicate that to larger companies with experience management, how to make it scalable for a larger amount of clients. What or who will unite Ukrainians around restoring Ukraine? But in order to be united, we need to dig deep into that. because it needs explanation. Maybe banks do something like that because they have funding, because they have capital. Yes, sure, banks, they accumulate the funds. And if you take a deposit certificates, these are free money that are not invested. And the latest figures for 166 billion, that's a lot. And it's growing, according to our estimations. I think in the next at least 2 years, the situation will be the same. The cash mass will rise and it will be accumulated on different accounts rather than the increase of credit portfolios. And I can explain the challenges getting back to the situation as it unfolded last year and now in the banking sector in terms of investments. Last year was special. There was a lot of confusion. Everything was collapsing. And it's natural that even the bankers took a conservative stance because we can't count the risks, and even the clients did that. And there were lots of credits, loans, they didn't know how to use that, but that's a lot of responsibility, and it's about personal guarantees. There was a period where they actively closed these portfolios, and there was a decision that helped resolve the situation. It was a decision that was done by and it was a decision of the Ministry of Economy to launch a mechanism of portfolio government guarantees to support agricultural sector most of all, because that was a period when there was a sowing season and there was a harvesting season that was critical. And using these portfolio guarantees, we started providing new financial support. And the government launched a very easy mechanism with clear requirements, underwriting on bank side, and we started working. If you take today's situation, now we have 50% coverage. In our case, our bank has a limit of 3.5 billion and 7 billion were handed out. That's what we did using these portfolio guarantees. How are we using these guarantees? Mostly territories 50, 100 kilometers from the conflict zone. It's very hard to forecast any missile hits. And it's mostly small businesses. You'll be surprised. For example, they don't have many capabilities because they're pretty small. And what's interesting, what's surprising, for this year and a half, we didn't have any default. No claims for the government to compensate it. The cost is less than 1% for us. The mechanism is very easy, the requirements are very easy, clear. They should be profitable. They shouldn't have any beneficiaries in Russia. And these requirements were pretty broad. But the thing is, we are fighting for a limit of this program, for a threshold. And we're trying to focus on state banks. They are pretty dominating right now, but we wanted to reinforce it. And it really works. If you take a look at other mechanisms that are developed by the Ministry of Economy, and we have some Western institutions coming, they're pretty difficult. The process to get guarantees for investment credit for many companies is pretty hard. It can be 6 months. It needs experienced managers. They need to know how to present it. Even the entry mechanism to participate is also difficult. There is information on the website that you can apply on the website online. You can send your application, but if you don't have any connections, experience, it's going to be hard for you. And we as banks, we have made a long way to develop our credit system. 20 or 30 years ago it was the same. You need to have connections, but now underwriting and decision making is pretty fast. So what I'm suggesting, in order to get to the point where we'll restore Ukraine, we need to make a long way, but we need to live on, and we need to fund the turnover capital cycles. It's possible when you have a very clear and easy entry mechanism. That means bank delegating should be very transparent, and there should be guarantees from the government. And it's sometimes gets pretty complicated. Sometimes you go enter the market, you have to sell, and you don't know the rates and so on. And trying lots of mechanisms, what my suggestion is focus on those mechanisms that are easy, clear, quick, and that can be scaled up. But even having these mechanisms, I can say that we don't have much demand. Starting with early this year, our credit policy doesn't have the military component. The clients are very conservative. We're supporting the capital. There are some point investments, but they are afraid to enter, especially using their money into long-term investment commitments. What can give them this reassurance? What can give them safety? That's the question. So that's my suggestion. Does it work? So who's going to make up this demand, ensure this demand? Because we have incentives, and this can drive demand. It's not 10 or 20 agreements. These are hundreds and thousands of agreements all over Ukraine because we are interested in the middle class. Who's going to do that? I can comment on that, if I may. We understand the reality. We understand the inflation that we had last year and the policy of the National Bank to cope with inflation. And the context is very important. Are Ukrainian businesses competitive with the Western markets? What about the rates? And how can we partially compensate the rates for the 579 program? How can we unlock these investments? How can we give business a possibility to attract these investments for affordable rates that will allow them to refinance their debts? Around 19% of funding was based on a 579 program. That's very important peculiarity that made this unlock possible, and the credit portfolio, based on the latest statistics, the portfolio of small and medium businesses began to grow for the first time, starting with the Russia's aggression. Thanks for the answer. But I would like to listen to Serhiy's suggestions. That's true. The only program that ensured development of the portfolio was 579 program, especially combined with portfolio guarantees, because it allowed us to compensate that, ensure low rates without requiring large amounts to cover the risks, and that was the only portfolio that grew. I would like to address the audience. That was a pretty pragmatic perspective that Serhiy provided. This tool, does it really work? So if you use these guarantees from the government, if you receive that funding, please raise your hand. We have people, okay, 1 or 2, so there are some, not many, of course, that won't make us happy. We want to make sure it's comfortable, and we want to expand it. And Serhiy, you said that it's difficult to get these guarantees. 6 months of bureaucratic and these bureaucratic requirements. Also, is it difficult to get insurance from your company using your mechanism? I will tell about my experience. I worked with credits. So it's the curve is pretty flat for years. They're not funding new industries. This is project funding. It's not practiced much. It's mostly one credit portfolio from one to another, and these enterprises, they're changing banks, and this lasted for years. And I'm talking to you speakers, especially if you work in the industry. We don't like that. We need to look for ways where Ukrainian government and banks and investors will take larger risks than they ever had. We need to risk, because if we don't consolidate, if we don't take that risk, the investments into our bonds will not restore the economy, will not create jobs. So I think our discussion brings us to this, and we are addressing international donors as well. Please take the risk, and they do. But they have very conservative approach as well. I think Ukrainian institutions need to demonstrate the possibility to get to take more risk, because we know our country and all our credits are closed. And we don't normally apply for guarantees. And we demonstrate extremely high consolidation. Maybe I'm mistaken romantically, but we need to look outside of the box. Just wanted to comment, maybe it's time to talk about real sector. I'll say this, what do we have in the country? Greenfields, brownfields, shattered assets, enterprises, and huge need for funding. This balance sheet that banks will look into, and international institutions. Just Ukrainian economy, businesses are so exhausted. So we will look for nice balances, and it will be hard to find them. This is why the business environment has changed. Our balance has changed. Our assets has changed. But narratives that we keep hearing, they're the same. Not from IFIs, not from our esteemed banks. So what Ukrainian banks do, they support small and medium businesses. That's the foundation of our economy. But what can we do with the scale of that restoration? That's a very hard question. I like BlackRock's approach and just want to tell you more about these dialogues. They allocated additionally as ad hoc a fund for preparatory stage. And they faced the situation when they have these prerequisites and the development of businesses, their readiness to be funded or to attract partners. It requires money, efforts, feasibility study if it's project financing, and even preparation of the permit documentation. All of the document package that's required takes time and money. And this process is basically stuck. BlackRock is going to allocate additional funding and investments to prepare Ukrainian businesses. And why are they the only one that do that? We need to take a look at that thing and prepare for larger investments. The second thing, in Ukraine, unfortunately, we have problems with property rights. Ukraine was never stable in that extent, and when you are going to buy something, you have lots of different owners, and they will sue you. Where's this purity of these assets that we have in Ukraine? And that's the question. So foreign investors will look into separation of assets into separate companies to make new businesses and new legal entities out of it. That's a huge shift of the pattern that we had before. I can't see how Ukrainian banking system is embedding into that system. Hopefully it will happen someday. So we have lots of challenges, and we need to monitor these things very carefully. Thank you, Yulia. I think Volodymyr has a comment. I want to add more about BlackRock. We work with them closely to create a Ukrainian Development Fund. And on the Advantage Ukraine platform, we have more than 10 projects that are bankable and they amount to $50 million. And we're looking for projects like that to be able to work with them. Because apart from for fund structuring, the question is what are the pipeline, what is the equity funding amount, what can we do next year? So we're looking for projects, and that's a very important task for the business community in Ukraine. And you don't just look for it, you have to support them as well. Thanks.
So I just want to come back to Oleksandr Komarov, just a couple of words, because we have relation to the same strong, to me it's like a new industry, powerful one. During the war, it demonstrated in the value of bread and water, the call to your mom, let's say a call to your husband, to the front line or family, through the borders and establishing the connection, restoring the connection. I think these people are heroes. The industry is heroic, and we are grateful to all of you, of course. You as the biggest mobile operator and the network of other companies, your capital investment, annual investment is huge. You invest in various tools. What motivates you? The risks are just like for others. Investment, $1 million, $100 million every year. So what motivates you? It requires your explanation. Okay, I will start, I guess, with I planned to be online in this discussion today. I plan to join online because this week we have a big strategic session where we present our 3-year plans and yeah. But on October 6th, Security Service presented a press release telling that 20% of companies with Russian share of ownership, corporate rights of these companies, these are under arrest, and I had to go back. I had to go back because we don't understand actually what is happening. We still did not receive any court decision. No court decisions, nothing, no opinion. So it's about investment climate, in my opinion. Everything that we have in a week, like only 2 press releases, one from Security Service, the other from the Prosecutor General. And it relates, indirectly or directly, it relates to one of the biggest investors. We are one of the biggest investors in Ukraine's economy, the Kyivstar company. So since the beginning of full-scale invasion, we invested 15 billion hryvnias. Out of these, half within the last 3 years, 15 billion. More than 50% from February 24th. Why we invest? A small example. Yesterday we had network in Avdiivka. Today we have no network in Avdiivka, right? And when we have a chance, an opportunity, as when we can, we will go back to Avdiivka. We will build the network from the scratch. This is one of the areas where we will spend these 600 million. You know that it's not even an example, a plan of recovering and restoring occupied territories from the standpoint of connection. Hundreds of millions of dollars of direct investment to build the network if we are successful enough and happy enough to reach that period, you know? So I would really like to stress on the following. We have, in my opinion, we have to be very careful and very rational when it comes to internal investors. Foreign investors, they come to internal investors and they ask like, how are you doing? How's happening here? On Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I had huge like wave of calls from international investors to VION company. And they are asking me, what is happening? Like, what does that mean? We've just read the title in a very reputable newspaper that the assets are arrested. I start calming them down and telling and explaining and encouraging them maybe even to help us, you know, in this really difficult situation. And all this is, you know, backed by VION leaving Russia that we had on Monday, you know. I don't believe in conspiracies. I'm not prone to that. But I think that this is somehow interrelated. On Monday, the VION company left Russia. And finally, without any, like, you know, opportunities to return to Russian market. And I guess that this Russian factor that we speak of, it consists of two parts. First, the share of Russian capital in business. This is our case. And we have the minority owner, the indirect one. Yeah. So in the company, VION. An international company, VION company, which is placed at 2 stock markets, free float. They do have as a huge share. So this Russian factor also comprises the presence in Russia. Maybe we need to be more, we need to show more respect to international business and the situation that they are in right now. Instead of shaming and bullying and like our agency saying the sponsors of war and the list, maybe we have to talk, or then we have to go back and put on that list the head of Naftahaz, because we are still ensuring transit of gas, guys. I think this is correct. But we have to be non-discriminatory to all the market participants. 600 millions, a couple of areas. Yes, we now plan how shall we invest. First, building the LTE network. Our current internal mission is to save Ukraine and help people. Connection, mobile connection, giving connection to any part of Ukraine. This is our vision. Then, secondly, crisis investment in the recovery, big investment. Third, okay, so fixed connection. We already today lead the biggest gigabyte network, and we come to Japan. I remind you that Kyivstar has more than 1 million households with fixed connection and stationary one. And also investing in business, which can enrich the digital experience of our clients, like healthy, yeah? I asked of Preply because to me it seems like it's the same as healthy. Kyivstar is investing in equity of a small Ukrainian player. In a year, being as an owner, $3 million invested in this player. What actually happened? The team increased 2.5 times. Just one example. The number of telematic consultations within the year grew twice using the Healthy application. People from any part of the world got a chance to talk to a doctor, to their clinician. So another thing I want to go back. Okay, we need to be predictable. We need to be tactful towards local investors, being careful with them. Okay, let's be so frank. There is no difference between OTP and Raiffeisen, all right? Between banks. But it is, as it seems to be now, it is. Just because Mr. Orban is aggressively defending his investments or his companies in Ukraine. So it seems to me that we have to focus more on internal investor. We said that we need to reach the stratum of new companies where we can give credits, these exist. It seems to me this stratum, this layer has to be created still. Yeah, okay. Giving them the chance to grow, to put the roots in the ground in these conditions that we have. Thank you. Alexander, when we shaped the panel, we didn't have those news when I was asking when I was shaping. Yeah, I would change my question, of course. So it's very unpredictable. You can see the news are changing quickly. And I'm not in the power to give comments on this sanctioned investor factor. I just can't say anything about it. But it seems to me that that special bodies are responsible for it. I will quote the Prime Minister. He spoke of predictability. We saw that in the video for all investors in certain difficult conditions and circumstances related to property ownership or implementation of strategies. Predictability would help more than unpredictability. And you hold the microphone. Yes, I'm holding it tight. Okay, a painful thing was mentioned. Truly, local investor requires respect. This is the foundation for future economy. What I hear from investors, and I've been to the US already and to the UK and Europe, everybody says the same thing. This promotion of the PPP, of joint ventures, is unclear that we have right now. The whole private business will rely on private business in the country. This is the basis of strong economy. So when it comes to the current situation, like what's happening, unfortunately, I state that local investors are weakened with the state policy on sanctions, and it's operationally not the best one. Why we stop Ukrainian businesses with Ukrainian employees? We have to be very careful with our people and take care of them. Investment is, first of all, the responsibility. Okay, so give us as employers to bear that responsibility and be responsible for the people, for the regions. We had this program of investment for more than 2 million hryvnias that we had during the war, you know? We never stopped investment to gas. Gas licenses were stopped, were suspended, and this is the result of that policy, but it's not even about this, all right? I just want to give a sort of strategic vision regarding what's happening. We are observed, we are watched as another Zimbabwe. That's how we are perceived. I'm sorry for saying this, but again, they see that we are trying to we're fighting for property. It doesn't matter how the policy is called. This is the feature, this is the manifestation that we are fighting for the property. There is like a battle for it. A Game of Thrones is happening. Investment climate, it will not be like a prerequisite for it. And strategic risks are the following. The state now is controlling, as far as I remember, more than 70% of the economy. What will happen then? Foreign investors will come. They will demand for guarantees for their rights to titles. So can someone give a guarantee for those rights? You know, I don't think so. Does the state have enough money to invest in those businesses? No. I'm sorry for, we just have 5 minutes. We have to be really, really, so the result and the conclusion is simple. I think that thoroughly designed policy, careful and rational policy, this is something that we need to have, and rule of law that we all think about. If rule of law becomes the milestone for everything happening in the country, then the investors will come today in the evening. All right, I have a task in 5 minutes to change your mood to positive, okay? Because we started shifting to pessimistic, angle. We started with a better mood. All right, so I'm just stating what's happening. Okay, Crispin. But closer, microphone closer to the mouth, please.
You was positive on partnership with the state?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's difficult, appalling circumstances. I don't agree with the Zimbabwe analogy at all. I know Zimbabwe. It's completely different. But it is difficult, there's no doubt. But I do think there is some progress. I mean, getting together, and hopefully, as I say, in 10 days, we'll have the first sizable public-private partnership, ensuring $6 billion worth plus, more than that, probably $10 billion worth of export through the Black Sea. And that is a big, big step forward, getting public money from Ukraine and global money through Lloyd's of London insurance coming together at scale. We've never done that before. Tick in the box. You heard it here first. As of tomorrow, investors and insurers globally will be able to go online and find out in detail what is happening in Ukraine. One of the challenges getting foreign investors here is all the countries tell people not to travel to Ukraine. We're putting together a global travel insurance policy to give affordable insurance so that investors will actually come to Kyiv, because half of them say they won't come at the moment. There's a lot happening. My God, it's a long way to go, but I do think we're making some real progress.
Thank you. Vasile, you were silent quite a long period of time. And what is your reflection to the discussion?
No, look, I was silent and I don't want to come again. I don't want to come across as the crazy guy. I feel the pain of some of the speakers on this panel. Believe me, I feel your pain. And I think you're right to speak up. And I think what you say, I hope is heard by the people who decide about things like this. At the same time, I do want to end on this optimistic note. And as tough as things look, and it helps to read history books now, that's what gives me some peace of mind. So in March 1945, Tokyo was completely destroyed. There was not a single, standing home in that country. There's a picture of Tokyo in March 95. It is simply a sea of fire. 15 years later, and Japan was hated by everybody, by US, by South Korea, by China, by all the neighbors, Indonesia. 15 years later, the GDP of the country overtook UK's. So fast reconstruction is possible. We'll need to adapt. Some of the industries that have worked will not work in a capital intensive, and high yield and high energy cost world. So yes, we will have to change. Yes, some of the traditional industry will have to shift elsewhere and to less capital intensive, less energy intensive. But I do believe in a bright future for Ukraine. And at least when it comes to Horizon Capital, we'll put this $300 million to work. And I'm sure it's going to be a blockbuster fund.
Thank you. Volodymyr,
Volodymyr, your reflections? Oh, right. Very important point just to put. So we can have a separate panel on reforms, as always. In the framework of government and in the ministry, we are designing a Ukraine plan, and in the Ukraine facility from Euro Commission, we'll get funding for the next 4 years, 50 billion euros, and part of that 8 billion for the private sector development. In the framework of strategy of Ukraine's recovery, it's not just about the funding. It's not just about sectors, but about reforms, guys. So me and our Western partners, we have very tight coordination and cooperation on conditionalities. And all the issues raised today, we discuss it with them. The investment climate, with the European Commission, we discuss it with other partners on the G7, G19 and multi-donor coordination platform. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yulia, yeah. Just what we say about challenges that we do have, it doesn't mean that we are not moving forward to reconstruction of the country. And the fact that local investors in such condition, even trying still to engage in some partnerships and to have some constructive, positive mood and trying to maintain business, to work for the country, I think this is the most positive news that we can actually get as of now. Thank you, Serhiy. I just want to add a little bit of optimism to that cake, as we're mixing it. So I think that we managed to do a lot and build a lot to promote investment inside and outside both. Doesn't matter how it goes, because all the programs with international investors are there. Inside the country, we have it as well. We have so much money accumulated inside the country. I do think that our focus should be on how to make this en masse and how to simplify the access, and that then it will work. Oleksandr It's a mistake. I can't be the last person to be asked. No, it's a big mistake. No, definitely. Yeah, we are investing, and it's a paradox, but the consumption grows substantially. The mobile connection, its consumption grows 30% since the beginning of the year. We lost 10% of the consumers, actually, but still, people using the mobile data, it's growing, the number is growing, and the mobility of people is growing inside Ukraine. This is what we see today. So, we invest, we develop, we evolve, we give new services to people. We have huge progress on deregulation led by the Ministry of Digital Transformation. It's a huge progress. We changed the time for building one site. It's changing. Deregulation actually is working. We have the focus on that. So we invest, we work. And it seems to me we're building one of the best networks in the world. Yeah. The time is almost finished. Those who insist on questions, raise your hands, but I would say I really want to save our time. So the conclusion. Big fat red line to be drawn. I'll be so brave to say that Ukraine's recovery and rebuilding is definitely consolidating us. It's a glue. And despite the fact that companies are in very different condition today, and international investors and internal investors' opinions, they have different pain level or pain tolerance. They have different experience, let's say. So I want to transfer this question to Ukrainian party, those operating the reforms and operating the funding. As Prime Minister said, we have to demonstrate our partners, international partners, that we can take those risks in our country for bigger investment, for bigger guarantees, for better practices. When this leverage, when the funding reaches the aim in short period of time to have more participants, and the intentions are presented in the panel we had, I'd say today, the actual institutions, big people and big institutions with really deep expertise sharing their visions. We were so happy that we had such an open, very open with various ideas, but still there's one conclusion for us all.
And if you have questions, please raise your hand. We have a question. Sorry, no mic. Were there any case where insurance was provided to cover? Sorry, couldn't hear all of the question. We've signed 2 agreements for investment coverage. 2 companies received that coverage, received insurance. Insurance amount was 10 million. The other one amount is confidential, and the same applies to insurance payments. But I can share contacts of Mega Development Finance Corporation. You can contact them. Publicly it's very hard to disclose because you need due diligence and you need to understand the risk of a specific asset. Big part of this 10 million will be allocated for de-risking, and we're talking to the European Commission about the specific tools. The information will be available. The detailed information will be available in December when we develop the concept and we have the response from the European Commission. So we will have a discussion about the specific tools, financial tools that will allow them to distribute that. Another question. Please introduce yourself and the company. Alexander. Excuse me, no mic. Yeah, that's not a question, but thank you for reminding that. Okay. Dear guests, well, wish you good health and wish you victory and glory to